I am Walter Morrison. I'm 67 years old, and 3 days ago, I buried my son. But before the headstone was even placed, my daughter-in-law Stephanie stood in my driveway and said, "I need you out of the guest house by the end of the month." Michael left everything to me, and I'm selling the property. I just nodded, loaded my toolbox into my old pickup, and drove away. She thought I was just a broke retired janitor who'd been living off my son's charity. She had no idea what she'd just done. Because 48 hours later, she didn't get a buyer for the house. She got a visit from the Portland Police Department. But before I tell you how I dismantled her lies piece by piece, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe that justice always finds a way, please like and subscribe to this channel. The rain was coming down hard at Riverview Cemetery. That's Portland for you, even in August. I stood there watching them lower my boy into the ground, and I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. Michael, 38 years old, gone. Accidental fall down the stairs, the police report said. My son, who'd climbed mountains, who'd hiked the Pacific Crest Trail twice, who never missed a step in his entire life, just fell down his own stairs and broke his neck. My mind couldn't make it fit. Around me, people were crying. Michael's co-workers from the engineering firm. Our neighbors from the old days when he was growing up in southeast Portland. Mrs. Chen from the corner store brought flowers. These were good people sharing this impossible grief with me. And then there was Stephanie. My daughter-in-law stood under her designer umbrella, checking her phone. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, and sunglasses so big they covered half her face. She wasn't crying. I watched her out of the corner of my eye while the pastor talked about God's plan. Her thumbs were moving across her phone screen, texting. At her husband's funeral, she was texting. The service ended. People started coming up to me, hugging me, saying those things people say when there are no right words. I wanted to stay. I needed a moment alone with Michael. But Stephanie grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my old work jacket. "Walter, we need to talk. Now." Her voice wasn't sad. It was irritated, like I was wasting her time. "Let's go. I have an appointment." Back at the house Michael bought 5 years ago in the West Hills, people gathered in the living room. There was food nobody was eating and coffee nobody was drinking. Michael's friends were looking at photos, sharing stories. I sat in the corner, numb, staring at a picture of Michael on his 10th birthday, holding up a model rocket we'd built together in my workshop. One by one, people left. By 6 o'clock, the house was empty except for me and Stephanie. She'd changed out of her funeral dress. She was wearing yoga pants and a tight tank top, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked relieved. "Okay," she said, dropping onto the white leather couch. "We need to discuss your situation." I looked up through my grief. "My situation?" "Yes, your living situation." She crossed her arms. "You've been staying in the guest house for what, 6 months now?" "Rent-free. Michael invited me," I said quietly, after I retired. He said he wanted me close. "Well, Michael's gone now." Her voice was flat, businesslike, "and I need to move on with my life. This house is too big for me. I'm selling it." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "Selling it?" "Stephanie, Michael just died 3 days ago." "Can't we? I've already talked to a realtor," she interrupted. "The market's hot right now. I should get close to 2 million for this place. But I need it empty. That means you need to be out of the guest house by September 1st. That gives you 4 weeks. I stood up, my knees aching. "Stephanie, this is Michael's home. Our home. He loved this place." She actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that didn't belong in a house of mourning. "Your home? Walter, let's be real here. You're a retired school janitor living in a guest house. Michael felt sorry for you. He was supporting you out of pity. But I'm not going to carry that burden." She walked over to the kitchen counter and pulled out a folder. She slapped it down on the coffee table. "Michael left a will. I'm the sole beneficiary. The house, his 401k, his life insurance, everything. It's all mine now." I picked up the papers with shaking hands. I saw the legal language, the signature at the bottom that looked like Michael's, but something about it felt wrong. The M was too round. He wouldn't do this, I whispered. He wouldn't cut me out completely. Oh, please, Stephanie scoffed. You barely had a relationship. He visited you on holidays out of obligation. This is my house now, and I'm making the decisions. So, 4 weeks, Walter. Pack your things. And if you're not out by September 1st, I'll have the police remove you for trespassing. I just stared at her. This woman my son had married 3 years ago. This woman I'd welcomed into our family. She'd waited until the day of the funeral to throw me out of the only home I had left. I looked at the signature on the will. I thought about her checking her phone at the cemetery. I thought about Michael, healthy and strong, supposedly falling downstairs he'd walked up and down 1,000 times. I thought about the lie she'd just told me, that Michael and I barely had a relationship. Something cold settled in my chest. My hands stopped shaking. I stood up straight and looked her in the eye. All right, Stephanie. She blinked, surprised. She'd expected me to beg. All right? Just like that? If that's what the paper says, then that's what it is. I'll be out by the end of the week. Her eyes narrowed. The end of the week? You don't need 4 weeks? No, I said, my voice empty. I don't need 4 weeks. I walked to the guest house and pulled out the green duffel bag I always kept packed for fishing trips up the Columbia River. I loaded it with a change of clothes, my shaving kit, and one small black notebook I always kept hidden under my mattress. Stephanie was standing in the doorway when I walked back out. Where are you going? For the first time, I heard a flicker of uncertainty in her voice. I have things to do, I said simply. Wait, you can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people? I stopped and turned. I gave her a small, sad smile. Tell them whatever you want, Stephanie. You're very good at that. I walked to my old Ford pickup, threw my bag in the back, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing there, confused and maybe a little worried. She thought she'd won. She thought the old janitor was beaten, driving off into the rain with nowhere to go. She had no idea I wasn't lost. I was heading exactly where I needed to go. I didn't go to a motel. I drove straight to downtown Portland, to the Wells Fargo building on 5th Avenue, 43rd floor. The offices of Patricia Volkov, the attorney who'd managed my affairs for the last 15 years. I called her from the truck. Patricia, it's Walter. I need to see you. Now. I heard about Michael, she said, her voice gentle. I'm so sorry, Walter. Come up. I'll clear my schedule. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in her glass-walled office, looking out over the city I'd lived in my whole life. Patricia sat across from me, a sharp woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. I told her everything, what Stephanie said, the will she'd shown me, the 4-week ultimatum, the strange circumstances of Michael's death. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on her yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and tapped her pen against her lips. Did Michael really leave her everything? I asked, my voice rough. Patricia didn't answer right away. She turned to her computer and typed in a password. A document appeared on the screen. Michael called me 2 weeks before he died, she said quietly. He was agitated. He said Stephanie had been acting strange, spending money they didn't have. He wanted to make sure certain things were in order. She clicked the mouse. He didn't write a new will. He didn't need to. She looked at me. Walter, do you remember what we did 15 years ago? After you sold the patent? The patent. Morrison's Industrial All-Purpose Cleaner. I'd invented it while working as a head custodian at Lincoln High School. Spent 10 years perfecting the formula in my garage. Sold it to a national chemical company for $7 million. The trust, I said slowly. Patricia nodded. The Walter Morrison Trust. We established it the week after the sale. You transferred every asset into it. Your house in Southeast Portland, your investment portfolio, the royalties from the patent. You did it to protect Michael's inheritance from any future lawsuits or claims. My heart started beating faster. And the house in West Hills, the one Michael bought. He didn't buy it, Walter. You did. Patricia pulled up another document. You purchased that house in 2019 for $1.8 million cash through the trust. Michael lived there, but the deed is in the trust's name. You're the beneficiary. I'm the trustee. Stephanie isn't on any of the documents. The room felt like it was spinning. So the will she showed me is meaningless, Patricia said. Even if it's genuine, even if Michael somehow signed it, he couldn't give away what he didn't own. That house belongs to the trust. She has no legal claim to it. I sat back, letting it sink in. Stephanie had just tried to steal a house that was never Michael's to give her. But why would she think she could? I asked. Why wouldn't she know about the trust? Patricia leaned forward. I've been asking myself the same question. And I think the answer is simple. Michael never told her. She pulled out a file. I pulled the phone records. Michael called my office 6 times in the 2 weeks before he died. He was asking about the trust structure, about his personal assets versus trust assets. He was scared, Walter. I think he'd figured out she was after his money. But he didn't have money, I said. Not in his name. The trust did. Exactly, Patricia said. Which means when she realized she couldn't access your money through Michael, she had to find another way. She looked at me with those sharp eyes. Walter, I think your daughter-in-law tried to forge documents. I think she thought if Michael was gone, she could claim everything before anyone asked questions. She didn't know about the trust, and Michael died before he could tell her the truth. I felt the grief shift, hardening into something colder and sharper. Patricia, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need to know everything. Her finances, her debts, her phone records, her movements the night Michael died. Everything. Patricia nodded slowly. I know someone. Former FBI. He's expensive, but he's the best. She picked up her phone. Go get some rest, Walter. Let me make some calls. We'll meet tomorrow morning, and I'll show you what I find. I stood up to leave, then stopped at the door. Patricia, do you think she killed him? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think we're going to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I checked into a Hampton Inn near the airport and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. I kept seeing Michael's face, his laugh, the way he'd call me every Sunday just to check in, the fishing trips we took every summer, 38 years old, fallen down the stairs. At 7 in the morning, my phone rang. Patricia, get back here. Now, you need to see this. By 8 o'clock, I was back in her office. Sitting next to Patricia was a big man with gray hair and cold eyes. He looked like he'd spent a lot of time in places where asking questions could get you killed. Walter, this is Marcus Webb, Patricia said. He spent 20 years with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I asked him to take a look at Stephanie. He worked all night. Marcus slid a thin file across the table. Mr. Morrison, your daughter-in-law is in serious trouble. I opened the file. The first page was a credit report. It was ugly. Stephanie Morrison has accumulated $180,000 in debt over the last 18 months, Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. Most of it is from a failed business venture. She tried to open a high-end yoga and wellness studio in the Pearl District. It went under in 6 months. She's been trying to stay afloat ever since. He flipped to the next page. Bank statements. She's been kiting checks between 3 different accounts, taking cash advances on one credit card to pay the minimum on another. She's drowning. Did Michael know? I asked. He knew something, Marcus said. I pulled his personal banking records. 3 weeks before he died, he moved $50,000 from their joint account into a new account in only his name. That's not something you do unless you're trying to protect assets or getting ready for a divorce, Patricia added quietly. Marcus nodded. And there's more. 2 days before Michael died, Stephanie met with a man named Craig Delgado. He's a loan shark operating out of Vancouver, Washington. My source says she owes him $40,000, and he'd given her until the end of August to pay. End of August. That was 3 weeks away. She was out of time, I said. Marcus flipped to another page. It was a grainy photograph taken from a distance. Stephanie standing in a parking garage, talking to a man in a leather jacket. She looked terrified. This was taken the afternoon before Michael died. She was begging for more time. He said no. I felt sick. My son, my boy, He'd been murdered for money she thought he had, but didn't. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. He pulled out his laptop and opened a video file. "This is from your son's Ring doorbell camera. The company keeps footage for 30 days. This is from 10:47 p.m. the night Michael died." He pressed play. The screen showed Michael's front door from the inside, the hallway, the stairs. Michael appeared at the top of the stairs. He was yelling, his face red with anger. I'd never seen him that angry in his life. He was holding papers. He shook them in the air, then threw them down the stairs. They scattered across the floor. Then Stephanie came into view. She was screaming back at him, her face twisted with rage. Michael started walking down the stairs. Halfway down, Stephanie appeared behind him, and she pushed. It wasn't a big push. It was quick, almost casual, but it was enough. Michael stumbled, his arms windmilling, trying to catch his balance. He fell. The sound when he hit the bottom made me want to vomit. He didn't move. Stephanie stood at the top of the stairs for 5 seconds, staring down at him. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. The video had no sound, but I could read her lips as she started crying, started acting. 911. "My husband. He fell. Please help." Marcus closed the laptop. The room was silent. Patricia's hand was over her mouth. "The police called it an accident," Marcus said quietly. "They saw a woman in hysterics. A man at the bottom of the stairs. They never thought to check the Ring footage because she never gave them access. She deleted the app from her phone the next morning. But she didn't know the footage was still on the company's servers. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the closed laptop. My son, murdered. Murdered by the woman he'd loved, trusted, married. The papers, I finally said, my voice hoarse. The ones he threw down the stairs. What were they? Patricia opened another file. "I think I know. Michael had an appointment with a divorce attorney the day before he died. Her name is Linda Frazier. She's in Beaverton. I called her this morning. She confirmed Michael had filed for divorce and had drafted a new personal property document, explicitly leaving his truck, his personal savings, and his 401k to you, not to Stephanie." She slid the document across the table. "This is a copy. Michael signed it in Linda's office at 4 p.m., the day before he died. He took the original home to show Stephanie, to tell her it was over. I looked at the document. My son's signature, clear and bold. Everything he personally owned, he was leaving to me. Stephanie's name was nowhere on it. So she knew," I said slowly. "She knew he was divorcing her. She knew he was cutting her out. She knew she was about to lose everything. And she had a $40,000 debt due in 3 weeks, Marcus added. She was cornered, desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." Patricia stood up and walked to the window. "Walter, we have everything we need. The Ring footage shows premeditated murder. The financial records show motive. The timeline shows she had opportunity. We take this to the DA's office today." "No," I said. Both of them turned to look at me. "Not yet," I said, standing up. "She tried to take my son's home. She tried to throw me out like I was nothing. She called Michael's love for me pity. She stood at his funeral and checked her phone. She doesn't just deserve jail, Patricia. She deserves to know exactly who she tried to play." I looked at Marcus. "Can you keep watching her?" He nodded. "Every move." "Good," I said. "Patricia, I need you to send her something. Today." That afternoon, Stephanie was probably measuring the walls in Michael's house, planning how she'd spend her $2 million. She was probably scrolling through vacation websites, planning her escape. The doorbell rang. It was a courier. He had her sign for a large manila envelope, legal documents. She probably rolled her eyes, thinking it was something routine. She opened it. The first page was a formal notice from Patricia Volkov's law firm, informing her that an investigation was underway regarding the validity of Michael Morrison's will and claims of forgery. The second page was a letter from the Walter Morrison Trust, informing her that the property at 2847 Skyline Drive was trust property and was not subject to any claims from Michael's estate. She must have read that 3 times, her hands starting to shake. Trust property? What trust? The third page was a copy of the deed, showing the house was purchased in 2019 by the Walter Morrison Trust. Her name appeared nowhere. The fourth page was worse. It was a copy of the personal property document Michael had signed the day before he died. The one leaving everything to me. The one she'd watched him throw down the stairs before she pushed him. I imagined she stood there in that big house, papers falling from her hands, finally understanding. She hadn't just lost the house. She'd killed Michael for money he didn't have, for a house that was never his to leave her, for an inheritance that didn't exist. She'd murdered him for nothing. My phone rang an hour later. It was Marcus. She's on the move, packing a bag. I think she's going to run. Let her pack, I said, but don't let her leave Portland. Not yet. At 6 p.m., Stephanie's doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't a courier. It was Detective Sarah Chen and Detective Mike Torres from Portland PD. I know because Patricia and I were watching from a car down the street, a live feed from the Ring camera on Marcus's laptop. Stephanie opened the door, her face pale. "Miss Morrison?" Detective Chen said. "We need to ask you some questions about your husband's death." "His death?" Stephanie's voice was high, panicked. "It was an accident. The police said so." "Why are you here?" "We'd like you to come down to the station," Detective Torres said calmly. "We've received some new information." "What information? Who gave you information?" She was breathing fast now, starting to panic. An attorney representing Walter Morrison submitted a formal request to review the case. "There are some inconsistencies we need to clear up." "That bastard," she hissed. "He's lying. He's making this up because I'm selling the house. He's trying to frame me." Detective Chen's expression didn't change. "Miss Morrison, we're not here to discuss property disputes. We're here to discuss your husband's death. Now, you can come voluntarily, or we can make this official." Stephanie grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "Fine, fine. But I'm calling my lawyer." They took her downtown. Patricia and I followed. We sat in her office, watching the clock. 2 hours later, Patricia's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. DA's reviewing footage now. Arrest warrant being prepared. "How long?" Patricia texted back. "Tonight, at 9:43 p.m. Detective Chen walked Stephanie Morrison out of the interview room. Stephanie was crying, mascara running down her face. "I didn't do anything." She was sobbing. "He fell. It was an accident. That video doesn't show anything." Detective Chen put her hand on Stephanie's shoulder. "Stephanie Morrison, you're under arrest for the murder of Michael Morrison." The words I'd been waiting to hear. Stephanie screamed. It wasn't grief. It was rage. Pure, animal rage. "No, this is bullshit. Where's my lawyer? You can't do this." They read her rights. They turned her around and cuffed her hands behind her back. "It was him!" she shrieked, twisting to look at the security camera in the corner. "It was Walter. He set me up. He killed Michael and he framed me. He's the one with the money. Check him!" But nobody was listening. They walked her out, still screaming. Patricia and I sat in the parking garage. We watched them put Stephanie in the back of a patrol car. I felt numb. Not relief, not joy, just hollow. "It's over," Patricia said quietly. "No," I said. "It's not over until she's convicted." The trial took 4 months. Stephanie's lawyer tried every angle. He claimed the Ring footage was doctored. He claimed I had a motive to frame her because I wanted the house. He claimed Michael's death was a tragic accident and that Stephanie was being railroaded by a bitter old man with money and connections. The jury didn't buy it. The medical examiner testified that Michael's injuries were consistent with being pushed, not falling. The Ring footage was authenticated by 3 independent experts. Marcus testified about the $180,000 debt and the meeting with the loan shark. Patricia testified about the trust, about Michael's divorce filing, about the personal property document. And I testified. I sat on that stand and told them about my son, about the man he was, about how he'd called me every Sunday, about how he'd invited me to live in the guest house because he wanted me close, not out of pity, about how Stephanie had looked at her phone during his funeral. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty, First-degree murder with financial motive. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. When they read the verdict, Stephanie didn't cry. She just stared at me across the courtroom with pure hatred in her eyes. I stared back. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just nodded once. Justice. It's been 6 months now. I'm back in my workshop, the one I built in the garage of my old house in southeast Portland, the one I'd kept all these years. I'm building something new, not a rocket, not a toy, something bigger. Last week, Patricia and I had a meeting. "What do you want to do with the house on Skyline?" she asked. "Sell it?" I shook my head. "No. I'm going to turn it into something Michael would have wanted. A place where kids who've lost their parents can come and learn. Learn to build things. Learn engineering. Learn that their circumstances don't define their future." Patricia smiled. "What are you going to call it?" I looked at the photo on my phone. Michael at 10 years old, holding that model rocket, his gap-toothed smile bright as the sun. "Michael's Place," I said. "We're going to call it Michael's Place." I learned something from all this. The world is full of people like Stephanie. People who measure your worth by what you appear to be. People who think quiet means weak. People who think old means finished. But true strength isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It's built in silence over years of patience and work. Stephanie spent so much time looking at the surface that she never thought to look deeper. She saw a janitor. She never saw the man who'd invented something that changed an entire industry. She saw charity. She never saw love. And that blindness destroyed her. Greed always destroys itself. Always. But truth? Truth just waits. Patient, quiet, inevitable. And when its moment comes, it speaks louder than any lie ever could. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, I have to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my place? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who only saw what they wanted to see? Have you ever waited patiently for the truth to reveal itself? Let me know your story in the comments below. And please tell me where you're watching from. Your stories give me hope. And if this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to share these journeys together. Because justice isn't just a word, it's a promise. And I intend to keep it.